By the time he had finished the ice cream and my car was still mostly frozen. So I was freshly single and decided I needed an ego boost, so I got all dressed up and went out on the town with the intention of getting laid. He was hot, tall and muscular. Got to talking and he was a firefighter in town for some training. We'll even get to the bedroom and everything is great. Makeout skills 8/10, finger skills 11 out of 10. He pulls his pants down and starts putting the condom on. I finally see it. It's the smallest thing I've ever seen. Maybe 2 inches. He was so nice and I'm not a mean person, so I went with it. He had to hold the condom on to keep it from slipping. I'm feeling hardly anything. Not even enjoyable at this point. I can tell that he can tell I'm not into it, so I tell him I want to finish him off, so I gave him a blowjob. Afterwards, we walked outside and as he was leaving he asked for my number because he had such an amazing time and wanted to see me again. I replied with, "Look, I just got out of a relationship and I just wanted to get laid. I had fun. Did you have fun?" He smiled and said yes. We hugged and he left. Dude was hot, I was into it. The pants came off, micro custard launcher. Okay. I figure he will be good at oral or get me off with his fingers. Instead he kind of squirmed around on me for a few minutes. When I asked if he'd help me come he said, "No, I'm good." Like I was totally willing to work with him, but he was selfish, so bye. 10 inches monster punching me in the cervix. I can only assume that's what getting kicked in the balls feels like. Wound up with a bruised cervix, some blood, and an innate fear to large disco sticks. Even to the point where I had to turn a guy down due to his size. I'm a sex worker in a brothel. The biggest snake I ever saw was when I was still pretty new. At the start of every booking we do a health check, where the guy drops his pants and we use a bright light to look for broken skin or signs of STDs. So this big guy comes in, drops his pants, and I'm left staring in utter disbelief at this noodle. He's not even hard and it's already as thick as a Coke can. I knew then and there I wouldn't be physically capable of sleeping with this guy, he'd rip me in half. So I go to the back room and ask if any other girls want to give it a try. This other girl, who was experienced and known for enjoying big mambas, went in to have a look and also noped out. So this poor guy got a refund and had to wait for his friends to finish. Met a guy on Tinder a while ago. Guy has a massive wiener. I had never had one before, so I was kinda shocked when I saw it. I was thrilled to say the least. I started giving him a BJ, and when it was finally time, I got down on all fours, and got ready, for what I thought would be an amazing time. It wasn't. This was a guy with a massive schlong doesn't put in effort because he thinks his PP is going to do all the work for him, case. It sucked. It hurt, it was uncomfortable, it was everything bad. The only good thing about it, was that he got off quick, so I could leave. I met a guy on Tinder a couple years ago and liked him a lot, so I was down for hooking up. Turns out he had a micro wang, but the guy was inhumanly good at oral, so I was totally fine with continuing. We hooked up a few times and split on pretty amicable terms. Not exciting, I guess. I wasn't his first partner by a long shot. He'd had a girlfriend for something like 5 years prior to doing the hookup thing and wasn't exactly unpopular on Tinder. He was a genuinely good person, so I imagine he got a lot of tail. Couple of stories come to mind. One time I was hooking up with a co-worker. At the time, I wasn't very experienced, pretty sure he was my second, honestly. Anyways, he was a good 8 inches, if not longer, and about as thick as my fist. It was awful because he was impatient. I'm a tiny girl and he just rushed right in. It was painful, I was crying, hoping he would finish quickly. Didn't hook up with him again. Hooked up with another guy, not sure where I met him. This guy had a smaller willy, but it was also really skinny. In fact, it really did remind me of a pencil. I remember thinking that it was going to suck and I was going to have to fake it. I did not fake. Some of the best times I ever had. He knew how to make what he had work. Hooked up with him more than once until he moved. My ex-husband has a 9-inch member. He wanted to see if I could take it all the way one night and had me on top. I told him to just ease it in and eventually I might be able to, but out of the blue he grabbed my hips and pulled me down while he pushed in. He went all the way in but I screamed and had to get off of him, it hurt so much. One guy I hooked up with for a while had the smallest mamba I've ever seen in person, probably qualified as a micro snake. My first clue was before his pants even came off. One day we were spooning and he was touching me, didn't feel any bulge in his pants. Then when we had sex he couldn't get it up at all, and when he finally did, he lasted all of 1 minute. It sucked because he was genuinely nice and fun to hang out with, and he wasn't the slightest bit insecure about his size, at least on the surface. We stopped hooking up because intercourse was too much effort with not enough reward, and I think he picked up on the fact that I wasn't into it. A guy I met on Tinder, extremely tall, huge hands, huge feet, micro pee-pee. It was so thin his condom kept almost falling off the whole time. To this day I do not understand why he didn't buy a smaller size. Intercourse was meh. He tried to ask me for oral but said he never gives women oral because it's not his thing, so I declined. Never saw him again. 2 stories for you. First was this guy who had a pretty big one lengthways, but it was bizarrely wide and flat. Like it looked like someone just taped 2 of them together side by side. I've never seen anything like it before or after. Also the guy was very small in stature. You would not know he was packing. Then suddenly bam, monster huge banana. Second guy was the biggest I'd ever been with. Probably 10 to 11 inches, no joke. It was a huge challenge to try and ride it, but worth the effort. But he couldn't keep it up for more than a few minutes at a time. One New Year's he called me up for a booty call. We're in Australia so it was a hot night, like 35 degrees or something. While driving to his place I stopped to get an ice cream. I only got to have 1 bite before I arrived at his place. I left it in the cup holder and went in. By the time he had finished the ice cream and my car was still mostly frozen. Let me just say, however, big or small, meat popsicles are awesome. Each one has its merits and each one can be enjoyed in its own special way. Friend of mine is a dom and she told me this story about a guy who came in for humiliation that had a genital big enough to be an elephant's chair leg. She kept him as a client but said it was the biggest lie she ever told in the business. Dude was super grateful because the super freakishly big antenna, he had kept him from having sex quite a bit. She never gave exact sizes, just would kind of say it would scare a size queen. All through high school I had a crush on this guy, B. He was your typical anime nerd with an added bonus of guyliner and emo floppy hair. I was in lust. We never actually hooked up in high school due to B's dedication to his online girlfriend, red flag. After high school we didn't see each other for about a year, but reconnected thanks to the magic of Facebook. We start talking and flirting. I told B I had the biggest crush on him in high school. He asked if I still did, then asked what I would do to him if he was with me. Words happen and B comes over. We're in my room and I turn around for something, and when I turn back B is laying on my bed with his pants off. It was literally the size of my pinky finger. And he had shaved his pubes against the grain so he was red and irritated with little ingrown hairs everywhere. My brain froze. I wouldn't have laughed but he said, "You ready for this D?" I broke, you guys. I knew not to expect a porn-sized trouser snake, but with all of his manly talk before I was expecting something. Nothing happened because I couldn't stop laughing. He got pissed and left and we haven't spoken since. But oddly enough we are still Facebook friends. Now he only dates Asian chicks. 2 stories. Went out with a guy who happened to be famous for his massive soldier. It was massive. It was also like effing a corpse. The guy didn't move a finger, thought he could rely on the size of his pork sword only. You cannot. I usually forget him when I think about people I've had sex with and time later remember the stiff. Went out with a guy who surprised me with a micropeter. No problem, I tried to give him oral. He was a complete a-hole who never offered to give it back to me. Penetration was just not possible due to his schlong size, and he was the only person to have ever had the nerve to ask me to leave from his house afterwards. Not even he finished that night. Absolute a-hole. The first guy I ever had sex with would constantly brag about how big it was. He even wore a ball cap that said something like big wiener and had a shirt that said half man, half horse. I was young and dumb, and looking back and beyond disgusted. The guy ended up being an abusive cheater too. Anyway, the first time we ever had sex, I felt nothing. When I lost my virginity, I had to ask him if it was in. The entire year we dated, it was never satisfying. I never felt much. Imagine my surprise when I started dating someone with an average size who knew how to work it. I was in heaven. I had the biggest crush on this guy when I was in HS. I was 15, he was 16. I lost my virginity beforehand. Honestly, the guy popped my cherry with his hands, so I figured just go with it. But that was it in regards to actual sex. This was the first guy I really liked that I got a chance with. We were fooling around and he took his boxers off, looking for head. It was so big it barely even fit in my mouth. I mean, my jaw was extended to the max. Needless to say, I was horny and so excited to be there, so I still wanted to do it, but oh my god was it painful. I ended up bleeding on my friend's brother's bed. He was hosting the house party, and it stained the mattress. Still the biggest I've ever seen 15 years later. It's always the tall skinny soccer types, I swear. I lived in Japan for a while and got to live out my greatest fantasy of sleeping with many beautiful Japanese men. I spent a lovely evening in a love hotel with a guy who was too gorgeous for words. But his yogurt hose was so small, and my ass so fat, that no matter how we tried, he could not get his member into my vag. Most embarrassing experience of my life. Live and learn, folks. The second guy I ever slept with had a very small willy, maybe 3 inches erect. Like I couldn't even tell if he was inside me. The only way I could get any pleasure was to be on top. He wasn't very creative or imaginative and didn't seem to realize that he needed to work a tad bit harder than most. I probably still could have dealt with all that until he refused to go down on me. He thought it was icky. Nope. This isn't really a story, but possible. Encouragement? I knew this guy, friend via the MMORPG we both played, not romantic. In fact, probably as far from romantic as two people can be. It was probably more like brother and sister who hate each other but are still kind of chill, who used to share entirely too much information with me. He had a lot of troubles. He was a bit of a psych case, on disability, on a lot of medication, and really a total a-hole. He also told me, I still wonder why the fuck he told me this, I really hope this wasn't his way of hitting on me, that he had a micro pork sword. Last I spoke to him he had just gotten married, had 2 kids, and I'm pretty sure he has another now. So, don't despair. Your banana size does not matter, and you can't help it anyway. So who cares? And on top of that, it doesn't matter if you're a serial liar or a manipulative a-hole or a complete waste of space. You, too, can find love and start a family. A friend of mine told me this story about a guy she was dating. They were together for about 5 months and she was getting super frustrated because nothing sexual was happening. They'd make out, and do some light humping but nothing more. One day she told me that they'd finally moved into the bedroom, but that when he dropped his pants he had a tiny beef whistle. Not just short, but also really thin. Like 3 inches long and skinny. She said it was like giving head to a toothbrush. They broke up and now she uses this story to warn other women that if the men aren't putting out then there's probably something wrong. Micro tool attached to a fat dude equals I genuinely did not know if it was in. Like I could feel something rubbing against me but it didn't feel like it went in. He ended up stalking me but that's a whole other story. Learned my lesson about dating fat neckbeards who live in their parents' basement at 29 years old who I met through WoW. I wish I was making this up but I'm not. The basement did have big windows as it was half underground and half open to the side of a hill, but still a basement nonetheless. On the flip side, the guy I've been dating for 4+ years now that has the second smallest pocket rocket I've seen. Wouldn't call it a micro Johnson since I've seen one of those and that would do him injustice, but he is definitely smaller than average and that is completely irrelevant to 1. Our relationship and 2. Our sex life. His tongue feels great, like I'm actually kind of team small danger noodle now because it's the best sex I've had and never have to worry about getting my cervix bruised. 10/10 would bang for 4 years and counting. A friend of mine, great guy, similar interests, great taste in lots of things. We got along so well. We laughed together. I enjoyed his company a lot. I thought of hooking up with him many a time. Finally the night came. Christmas Eve, his house. We both had quite a bit of gin and wine. He kisses me. I'm thinking, this is it. I'm into it. Unfortunately, his custard launcher was smaller than my pinky finger. I knew that he had thyroid problems, so I'm not sure if it was related to that. Because he was such a wonderful individual, I played good guy Greg. His knob wasn't anywhere near big enough to slip into my vag, but I pretended it was. I sucked him off, shot him seductive looks. Acted excited and pleased. Made him feel like I was there for him. Everyone's seen porn, and I'm sure that he had some self-esteem issues about his size. But he was such a great friend, he deserved to be treated right. I hooked up with him a few more times. He actually has a girlfriend now. We don't talk anymore, but I am delighted to see that he's found someone and that he appears to be happy. The first time I had sex with my husband, it took us literally half an hour of trying just to get the tip in. But when I relaxed a bit more and got used to it, it was the best sex I've ever had, so I married him. It still takes like 5 minutes at least for the pain to stop when we start, but that turns me on. I have a bit of a virginity fetish, and with him, literally every time feels like I'm losing my virginity, and we have to be super careful in some positions. It was just a matter of figuring out the angles. In some positions he can just relax and pound away, and in some he has to go slowly and carefully not to smash my cervix in. Small price to pay for that kind of filling. It's also curved downwards a bit, so positions like spooning or doggy are to die for. Also, big meat does not mean long meat. Your length means nothing, it's all about the girth.
Thank you for watching Susi Confession and AskReddit video. Hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon.